Story number 2 is about the Chicago Sun-Times and Tribune covers after the World Series. So, Craig, do you know what the World Series is? Are you familiar with
yeah.
sports?
I watched it, actually.
You watched the whole thing, really?
I watched the last, the series between the Chicago and the team that lost.
Okay. Yeah, Chicago and that other team.
The Indians, yeah.
Yeah. So was this hockey or football? I don't know. Was it? So anyway, the story is, this comes to us from Petapixel. So the story is, if you didn't know, and if you are not a sports fan, the Chicago Cubs finally won the World Series after a 108-year drought. And I am from Chicago, so we had to have the story in this episode. But there was like, how do we tie this into photography? So
you had to search the internet far and wide.
Well, apparently some pictures were taken of this game. There you go. There's the tie-in. So let's see. I'm going to read this blurb. The Chicago Cubs finally won the World Series last night after a 108-year drought. But what some photojournalists talking over the cover photos. They're talking over the cover photos that were published by 2 of Chicago's biggest newspapers, the Tribune and the Sun-Times. Martin Bailey, did you look at this article over on Petapixel?
Yeah. I think we knew that something like this was going to be coming, and it's the quality of photos that are being used by newspapers that have basically trained their reporters to use an iPhone to make the photographs.
Yeah.
The quality of the 2 photos is just it's right there to see. Obviously, you're gonna link to this in the show notes.
Absolutely.
So if people haven't already looked, the Chicago Tribune shot, that's got like an epic photograph of the players jumping up, and then the Sun-Times has got like, it looks like probably is something that one of the people in the audience just shot with their iPhone.
Totally.
And it's it's sad. It's a sign of the times, but it's also in many ways I'm happy this has happened, because it will hopefully make some of the companies that are thinking of cutting their photographers think more about it. I don't think that it will stop many of them, because photography is being commoditized. It's the value of photographs is going down every year, and I think that there's budgets are being cut worldwide, and it's going to continue to happen. On a totally selfish note, us photographers that actually make part of our income from selling photos, either as stock and prints, things like that. We're surrounded, the world is full of photographs every day. We look at billboards, the TV, newspapers, magazines. And if the quality of the photos that's being forced on us in these forms of media goes down, then it's going to help our photographs to stand out.
It increases the contrast, right?
Yeah. So, totally selfish way to think about it. But, it's like stock as well. A lot of the companies that are selling stock for pennies, the quality of their work is obviously going to be less than you'll get from a more expensive but a fully curated library of images from companies like Offset, the one that I work with. And so, I think that if you consider it that the quality of work of photographs being shown to people is going down will help us to stand out, that's maybe a good thing. But I think that obviously the bad thing is that there are photojournalists around the world that are losing their jobs because of this trend. It's a sign of the times. We're not going to change any of this. We're not going to stop Adobe selling their new Adobe stock and giving essentially some of the photographers that are contributing like 25 cents per photo, less than that in some cases. We're not going to stop it. Photography has been commoditized. But I think that this is a good story. It's a win for the photographer in many ways.
Yeah. I agree. And it's the whole contrast argument. And we covered the story, a couple of years ago or a year or so ago?
It was a couple of years ago. Yeah,
when they started axing these photographers. And now and we keep seeing these things happen. It's turning over, it's eschewing the idea of professional journalism for crowdsourced journalism, which is pluses. It has its pluses and minuses. Crowdsourced or everyman journalism means you'll cover every corner of the planet because everyone is equipped with a camera these days, but not everyone is equipped with the artisanship required to create a good image. Craig, what do you think of this?
Well, they do have the reporters taking photos with iPhones instead of having the photographer go out with them. And for most stories, you would never even notice, or it may not make a big difference. But this was an iconic, this was a big deal. It should have been, right? And one photo, as he said, is iconic, and the other one, it looks, kind of like a snapshot from the audience. Now, it turns out that the one that the Sun-Times used that was just looks like a snapshot was done by a professional photographer. It was an AP photographer named David Phillip. And I went and looked at his body of work, and he takes epic photographs. So this was more just the newspaper. The editor doesn't know about photography, and they lost their photo editor as well. And so probably just picked one because it showed something he liked.
You would think, but what was going on in my mind as I read this was, okay, maybe what happened was there was sour grapes. If I was the editor and this was the World Series and I'm in Chicago and there's a chance that the Cubs may take it and it's a 108-year drought, I would be getting on the phone saying, okay, guys, I need some pro help here just in case, we take this thing. These are going to be some historic photographs. I wouldn't just trust it to somebody that didn't have any talent. And then the response I would probably get from those guys that had been cut loose would be like, go pound sand.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Go figure it out yourself. I'm not going to help you now when I'm trying to feed my kids and you let me go.
Right.
So
the economics of it are that, right, they are hurting. My local newspaper here on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday is, it feels like it's only 3 pages, long. They don't have any advertising anymore. It used to be, right, big, thick newspaper, and they're really struggling. And, internet has kind of, killed a lot of the actual newspaper jobs, right? Which we talked about years ago is why they laid these people off in the first place. I don't know how they solved that, right?
I started my career in Silicon Valley after leaving the military at the San Jose Mercury News. That was my job, and one of my favorite things to do at the San Jose Mercury News was to go back into the press room and see those giant press machines feeding newspaper through them. It's like giant transformer robots that are creating newspapers. It was like the most fascinating thing in the world, and it's sad to think that world, back then even there was the sign on the wall, because I think the big threat to newspapers back then, probably still today, was Craigslist, because newspapers made all their money from classified ads when you could just go on Craigslist and sell your stuff quicker for nothing, know? So they just took the wind out of their sails. That was the big threat. And now it's everything else. It's us, right? It's podcasts, it's blogs, it's Craigslist, it's Amazon. Everyone is taking the wind out of there. And now newspapers have kind of become, kids today some kids may have never even picked up a newspaper, in their lives, which is kind of strange. But as someone said I was watching the news, getting depressed yesterday, but they were saying something. Someone was saying something about they were having the discussion about. Actually, I think it was President Obama was talking. He had done this interview with. What's the comedian from Bill Maher? So he did an interview with Bill Maher, and they were talking about the president was talking about how the problem with information dissemination these days is the internet, and there's so many different news sources. There's nothing for people to kind of put their brain on to say, yeah, this is the right thing and this is objective journalism right here. You kind of get what the news outlet wants to tell you, and then if they say it with loudly enough and repeatedly enough, you will believe it. And he actually went on to say that newspapers are probably the only way, or one of the few ways, that people can get real objective journalism these days. So I don't know. It's scary, and they're going away. So then, what does the world look like in 2020? I don't know. After 4 years of this next president, right? So we don't know. We don't know. I don't know. Martin, how do you consume your news over there in Japan? Is it all online, or do you schlep down and go get a newspaper and read it?
We used to get a newspaper, but I rarely read it. My wife used to read it, and I'd pick it up every few weeks maybe. But that I've always been that way. I've never been a big newspaper reader. Since the internet came along, of course, I pick up stuff and I'll get snippets of news here and there. But probably, I mean, for me, the biggest thing is just I watch the news on the TV at least once a day. The problem with that, of course, is that the TV stations now, all of the news programs here are scared because Abe, the premier or prime minister or whatever of Japan, is bringing in these stupid laws that stop journalists from basically having freedom of speech. And they're making things a little bit scary over here for the journalists, but still generally we've got good quality news, and I just watch the news on the TV. So I've never really been one of the people that was contributing to keeping newspaper companies in business anyway.
Yeah, but see, that's the other thing, Martin. You hit an interesting point there. You get your news, some of your news from the TV, and one of the trends here in the U.S. is cord cutting. Right, so people don't have that. I mean, I get YouTube, I get Hulu, Netflix, I get apps for Showtime, HBO, all that stuff. So I don't. I have CNN on Apple TV, but it's not like I'm going in there and I'm watching it regularly, right? So that routine that we used to have, where in the United States at least, it was watch dinner, sit down, watch the news. Now you're up to date, go to bed, get up the next morning, discuss what happened on the news around the coffee, around the water cooler, and then, rinse and repeat. That cycle is gone. So what do we do, especially if newspapers go away? What's next?
One thing that I do is I use a program, I think it's called Leaf. It's basically, they're kind of going out of fashion a little bit now. But it's an really simple syndication.
RSS.
RSS.
Yep.
So I've got a bunch of RSS feeds from various news sources. A lot of them are photography based. So if David Duchemin releases a new blog post, I get a little thing in Leaf. And I've got a whole bunch of photography related stuff, but I've got a few news feeds in there as well. So if something's announced that is important, then that'll often pop up in there. And I think that's probably, as far as just the written news is concerned, like in text, that's probably one of the main ways that I consume that. The problem is that I probably open Leaf, I don't know, once every few weeks.
Right.
I just don't have the time. I'm kind of confident that if something big is happening, I'll hear about it somewhere. And I reckon, I suppose I'm pretty passive as far as getting the news concerned. I'm not, apart from the news that I watch on the TV in the evenings, everything else, I just sit here and wait for it to fall into my ears or eyes. And generally it does. I can't really think of how, but I mean, even TWiP, just coming on here once a month or once every 3 months, I learn things that are happening. And when I listen, that you learn things, podcasts, especially things like this, and Sharky James's Petapixel. I mean, the Petapixel site is great for bringing news stories in the photography world, and Sharky does a great job of putting that out to the world. So subscribe to a few podcasts and you get most of the main stuff that's happening. Yeah. And I think that's probably what I'm doing.
Yeah. But again, you have to be, maybe we need some sort of podcast curation or some sort of curation, just because, like the president was saying in that interview with Bill Maher, he said something about if people watched only Fox News, they would never have elected him. Right. So, which is to say, and not to rail against Fox News. Yeah, not to rail against Fox News, but there's both sides of that, right? So Fox News may represent the right, and then CNN is the left, or there's nothing that's kind of like objective that you can trust.
Right. Well, we used to think we could trust, right, that it was unbiased, and maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but it wasn't so overt as it is now, right? They're obviously biased now, and it's hard to find one that isn't.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's upsetting. I get upset, and I want to move on to this next story after this, but I get upset and like like violently projectile ill. I watch these CNN segments where they try to be fair and balanced or whatever, and they bring on, they're talking politics, and they'll bring on, one or two people from the Trump campaign and one or two people from the Clinton campaign, and these are paid surrogates that are paid to argue regardless of how ridiculous the argument is,
Right. They make their money to argue.
Yeah,
right?
to argue. Like if the candidate that they're representing said, the Earth revolves around the moon, they would defend it to the end of time.
because that's how they're paid.
Because they're paid for that. But then there's a constituency of people that will believe that and follow it. Yeah. And I just have to turn it off. I have to walk away. Martin, you're lucky, man. You're lucky that you are not in this salad of craziness we have going on here in the U.S.
Yeah. Oh, we have our share of craziness here in Japan, but I don't envy you guys. It's but of course, I mean, a lot of the news at the moment is all about what's happening over in the U.S. So we're seeing it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. They don't call us a superpower for nothing, man. I'm telling you.